Today we're going to show you how to replace and adjust the throttle cable on an Avenger or HDI Argo. First off, on here you're going to notice that there's a little bit of play in this throttle cable. It's not super loose, but there's enough play in there where you could bend it back and forth, and it's not guitar string tight. You can also check that by going over to the handlebar, and on the handlebar just grab a hold of the throttle and turn it back and forth gently. If you have a little bit of play in there where it actually doesn't engage the throttle cable, then you're good and set. And so if you don't have that play in there, you can come back around. The cover on the exhaust has been removed on this unit so we can see better into the throttle area. The tool you're going to need for this particular one is we have 2 3/8" wrenches, a 9/16", a flathead screwdriver, and a 5/16" socket wrench. So by taking the socket wrench, we're going to go ahead and loosen the area on the little tab that holds the throttle cable from moving. Once that's loose, you can go ahead and the throttle cable will pull out the back side, like so. And this is your lock nut here and your adjustment rod here. So you take that lock nut, loosen it up, and then turn your adjustment rod either more towards this way, which will tighten it, or back it off, and it's going to loosen it. You want that 1/8 inch or just a tad bit more of play in that rod or in that cable, so you don't over tighten the throttle. What happens is normally the little tip on this throttle cable will snap off where it goes into the plate because the throttle cable is over tightened, and it'll bend it up and then snap it off. Throttle cable removed down on the engine side. You can go ahead, on the top of this you got 2 screws. Underneath those screws are 2 nuts. Make sure you hold your hand underneath them, else they'll be gone forever in Argo land. As you disassemble it, the cable will pop off of the actual throttle itself. You can remove that down the end of the tube, revealing just your bottom end of the cable in the mounting bracket. You'll unloosen that nut there, and then the cable will actually just screw right out of the bracket. And then you can pull the whole entire cable back through the front of the Argo, through the engine compartment. It's always best to go ahead, when you reassemble this, reassemble from the throttle tube forward. That way you know everything is tight on this end first. Okay, so you notice that everything is unscrewed. You can go ahead and pull your throttle cable and the whole sheath back through the engine compartment and all the way down. So one thing you want to do is, these are really susceptible to getting rust in the cables and everything, so just give it a little bit of white lithium grease down inside right at the edge of the cable there, and then we'll also put some inside the throttle block once we assemble it. You want to replace, if this was your new cable, you're going to go ahead and screw the mount back down. Make sure you don't over tighten it because it is plastic and the threads are plastic also, so just nice and snug. And then you're going to take some of your grease and spray it right down into the channel area. By adding some grease in there, that's going to add nice and easy movement of the throttle tube. A lot of times what will happen is the cable will start eating into the plastic, and your throttle will stick, and just the movement of everything is impeded, so that grease will really make a big difference. So you're going to slide the tube back on, and you're going to see right as before you slide it completely on, you want to hook the throttle little ball onto the cable itself. There's a little notch right there where you add that in there. Once that's on there, you can go ahead and slide it on the tube, making sure you don't put the throttle tube too far onto the handlebars. What will happen is the rubber grip will catch on the end of the handlebar and make the throttle stick. So it's really important not to push the tube too far on, and just so that way you have nice, free, even movement. So you're going to take the rest of the block, put it back on top, and then you'll add your 2 screws and your nuts back on there. And before you lock them down tight, just make sure you got enough throttle play and your grip isn't touching the end of the handlebar. So once your handlebar is on, you want to rotate the cable forward just slightly so it's a nice fluid movement, and then just make sure your handlebar or your grip isn't on the handlebar end and it rotates nice and smoothly. Once that's checked, you can go ahead and lock everything down. Make sure you don't over tighten the nuts because they are on the plastic tube and you could crack it. Alright, we're going to treat this old cable, even though it is an older cable and there's nothing wrong with it, we're going to treat it as a new cable. The adjustment on that, you're going to notice right here on a brand new cable, is going to be completely tight. You can adjust that with your fingers with the factory one because it's not going to be super tight. And you can notice the threads, how they come out and go in. This particular cable is stretched out a little bit, so you'll be able to see really easy that we do need to make sure that it's tightened up. So as we go ahead and hook it back into our third little hole down here, okay, and then you want to take the tip of it and place it up underneath that tab. Once it's underneath that tab, you can go ahead and press the rod forward, and you can see where it comes out at the tip here. You're going to notice that this particular cable has a lot of play in it now, and we're going to take some of that out by going ahead and turning that. Once you have the tab and the throttle placed underneath the tab, you can go ahead and turn the large portion of your adjustment, and that's going to either add or subtract cable tension as needed. You want to make sure that the engine on this is also nice and cool. It's not necessary that you remove the exhaust shield, but it does make it easier. Okay, so now that everything is adjusted properly, you can see that you can move that throttle cable just slightly and it doesn't actually pull on the throttle mechanism. And that's properly adjusted. So once you have that there, you can go ahead and lock down your tab, and that's going to keep the throttle in place. And then you want to use your 2 3/8" wrenches and use your lock nut and lock that in there so it doesn't back itself out. Again, this particular throttle cable is nearing its end of its life, but it's not completely shot yet, so we're not going to change it quite yet. Okay, and then once that's on there, you're done at the engine compartment area. You can see that you have your proper movement in the cable here. It doesn't pull on anything. And then when you come back over to the throttle cable, to the throttle tube area, you have the correct amount of play in your throttle. Just enough to turn it and not overextend the throttle when you're at full throttle. That concludes anything for today. You can visit us at www.buyargo.com.